Alright fellas, well that just really happened. Dubois and Joshua just faced off in one of the biggest fights of the year and it certainly lived up to the hype. In a fight build-up where almost everyone wrote off Dubois, he came out and stunned the world, doing what people thought was impossible. He came to fight and Joshua came to box, and Dubois took advantage of the situation. And of course, after such a result, it leaves the heavyweight division in a bit of a troubled position, with fights that were seen to be next turned on their heads. So with all this going on, let's talk about the fight and let's talk about what's next for both Joshua and Dubois. For both of these fighters, it was a make it or break it fight. For Dubois, it was a fight to establish himself as the champ. After coming off a couple high profile losses in his young career, he had to impress, or it would be a long road back for him. For Joshua, this fight was crucial in solidifying his legacy. Beating Dubois would make him a world champion again and would set him up for some of the biggest fights of his career. The packed Wembley Arena was a sight to behold, and as round one began, we saw what we expected. Joshua working off the jab, trying to set the pace. His work originally seemed a bit more cleaner and he was simply here to box. Yet Dubois ambushed AJ and dropped him with the right hand, and set the tone for the rest of the fight. Joshua's legs from this point on simply were not under him. Through that second round, Dubois landed more shots and AJ looked pretty open with his hands down fairly low. By round 3, Joshua started to try to throw a bit more but was countered. Another knockdown and a further lead for Dubois. Now by the 4th, Joshua was all over the place and Dubois was really looking to finish the fight. Joshua was rocked once again, although looked to be coming back to life a little by the end of the round. And that showed with Joshua being able to put together a couple shots which put Dubois on the back foot in the 5th. Contrary to what the networks and the commentators say, I would say Dubois wasn't really hurt by these shots. His leg was stiff, yes, but they were big shots but not big enough. Landing these shots made Joshua more at ease though, dropping his hands and made him shoot wild, which resulted in Dubois finding that perfect right to the jaw which crumpled him in his place. After the fight, I did expect Joshua to lose his cool, yet fair play to him, he managed to keep it all together. And Dubois is now a legitimate world champion, defeating what I would say is one of the biggest names in boxing. He's a man of very few words. I do love though that he is pretty humble and collected in victory. For Dubois, it's the dream. For Joshua and pretty much all the promoters involved, it's a bit of a nightmare scenario. Let's first talk about Joshua. For Joshua, ever since the Usyk rematch, he's basically been taking stay busy fights. Now contrary to what Ariel Helwani said on the broadcast, and just a side note, I'm sure he's a nice bloke, but who keeps letting him onto boxing broadcasts? The bloke knows legitimately nothing. But he talked about how impressive Anthony Joshua's last few victories were, and how after this fight there'll be a bunch of revisionist history saying the opposite. But fighting the likes of Helenius, knocking him out when Helenius came in on a couple weeks notice isn't that impressive, and fighting against the likes of Ngannou doesn't truly prep you for a world heavyweight title match. Yet I think everyone, including myself, thought AJ is good enough even off the back of said matches that he should be able to go in there and put it on Dubois, but that obviously didn't happen. It's a long road back for Joshua. The bloke is 34, almost 35. His last truly impressive victories were almost half a decade ago now. Of course the Fury fight was meant to be next, yet I think that fight has disappeared, and if it ever does happen it won't truly have the same meaning as it had the potential to. For the Saudis, they obviously wanted this next. It's one of the biggest fights in the world to make. That's why you had Turki Al-Sheikh sitting next to Tyson Fury. There's talk from Eddie Hearn about a rematch clause, yet my question is, should he take it? It's a gamble. If he wins, he's right back up there and probably heading towards a trilogy match. Yet if it's more of what we saw tonight, it's a stain on his legacy and the public won't forget it. I guess retirement is an idea that's thrown out there, while also rebuilding is another option. I guess his camp will be watching the Fury-Usyk rematch closely. So if Usyk wins and decides to retire or moves back down to cruiserweight and the belts scatter, there's absolutely an opportunity that Joshua might find himself in another big fight for one of these belts. If that scenario happens, that's pretty much one of the only ways that the Fury fight would happen. Or he might find himself in the ring against a Zhang or a Parker for a belt. For Dubois, the world is now his oyster. Where he goes from here is yet to be seen. If for some reason what I said before doesn't happen, he of course will be looking to fight Usyk next. While also, his promoter Frank Warren probably would love to make a matchup between him and fellow Queensberry fighter Tyson Fury, especially after losing out on the payday that would have been Joshua v Fury. The bloke is incredibly young, and especially once a lot of the big names retire, he's in the seat to become one of the biggest names of the division. With the lack of rising talent, I don't see many of the younger generation having the potential to beat Dubois, with his toughest potential fights other than the big names coming against the likes of Bakole, Zhang and Parker. In terms of making big fights for the heavyweight division, the last year or so has been a disaster. Wilder was meant to fight Joshua and then he went and lost. Then Fury was meant to fight Joshua and he lost. And of course tonight Joshua was meant to fight Fury next, and then he went and lost. A lot of the big names are getting up there in age, and finally we are seeing time take its hold. Joshua isn't the fighter he once was, and the younger generation is hungry and wanting to take their place. Smart matchmaking by promoters can only last so long until you have to face a real challenge, and that's what we saw tonight. The world of boxing continues to surprise and leaves us in a very interesting position as fans. I guess all eyes will be on December, as the Fury-Usyk rematch will be the true indicator of what happens next, as long as the rematch clause doesn't activate. Personally, I don't overly want to see a rematch, and if Joshua doesn't retire, I hope to see him pursue whatever fight has the potential to be the most entertaining fight for the fans. Whilst for Dubois, I'm looking forward to watching whatever the future holds for him. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on the match. What was your reaction to the fight? Were you jumping off the couch or were you head in hands? And what do you think will be next for everyone involved? But just quickly, if this is your first time watching one of these, my name is Cloyster and I make boxing content to help keep you up to date and informed. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing, it really does help the channel. Yet, thanks for watching fellas, and I'll catch you in the next one.